Hey everyone, welcome back to the China History Podcast. Laszlo Montgomery here with another CHP episode. The topic for today, when I was first told about it, made me think, this would make a heck of a movie. And as I began to dig deeper into the story, I thought, it wouldn't be a bad CHP episode either. It kind of runs counter to the popular historical narrative about China's participation in World War II, or perhaps we could say it complements the narrative. The victim of Japanese aggression, the KMT-CCP contention playing out in the background, and the Pacific War in general. July 7th, 1937, the war began in China. 786 days later, Germany invaded Poland, and 828 excruciating days after that, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. So, according to my calculations, 786 plus 828, that equals 1,614 days. China had to carry the weight of this terrible war in the Pacific on its back. That, and all that meant, is usually China's World War II story. But the World War II story we're looking at today took place in Europe. And this whole slice of Second World War history only recently came to light, and it was presented in an exhibition that, beginning in 2024, to mark the 80th anniversary of the D-Day invasion, has run in Asia, North America, and Europe, and it concerns China's involvement in the war against Germany on the European continent, specifically off the coast of Normandy Beach on the 6th of June, 1944, and 2 months later off the coast of southern France. The man at the center of this tale was Mr. Lam Ping-yu, in Mandarin, Lin Ping-yao. We're going to look at his life today and all the history he personally got to witness and be a part of. And in looking at the life of Mr. Lam, we can broaden our perspective about the extent of China's involvement in this global conflict. I was approached last year about an exhibition that was traveling around Asia and Europe called Lost and Found in Hong Kong, the Unsung Chinese Heroes at D-Day. The Chinese name was quite different. 唐楼中的二战日记，从香港见证欧洲战场的中国身影. After a few back-and-forth emails, I got to meet up with the two curators of the exhibition, Hong Kongers John Mack and Angus Hui. Those two have been on the road like a couple of rock and rollers, telling this story to the world. They've given presentations on 3 continents and are really creating a lot of awareness about this recently discovered history told in the diary of one of the participants. And, well, I don't like to toot my horn, but one of the best things about being Laszlo Montgomery, well, I occasionally get invited to private showings and even get to mix with the curators themselves. So I got a personal viewing from John and Angus right there in the Ho Sik Yi Library of Hong Kong Metropolitan University in Ho Man Tin in fabulous Kowloon. And just in case any CHP listeners missed the exhibition or hadn't heard of this story, I'll tell it to you right here. As the Chinese name of the title of the exhibition suggests, 唐楼中的二战日记, it involves some diary involving World War II that was found in some Tanglou. Tanglous are mostly southern China, Hong Kong, Macau kind of thing. They're tenement buildings, not very tall, usually, but not always, 3, 4 stories, maybe only 2. But the thing about these Tanglou was that there was always some shop or business on the ground floor. Anyway, this building, named Western Court, located in Sai Ying Pun, to the west of the Central District of Hong Kong, was slated for demolition back in 2015. People are interested in all kinds of weird things, and there's a subculture of folks who have a passion to go photograph or take videos of abandoned structures or buildings about to be demolished. Some of these hobbyists residing in Hong Kong went in and walked around Western Court and took a bunch of snaps. And on the 9th floor, there was an open door leading to one of the flats. They went inside, looked around, and there it was, this 二战日记, this World War II diary. By the look and feel of the diary and the papers that went along with it, it looked to them about 72, 73 years old, as the dates indicated. These yellowed ROC-era personal documents, memorabilia, and this personal diary belonging to a man named Lam Pingyu were left behind by the occupants of this flat and fated to become part of the rubble when the wrecking ball brought Western Court down. This World War II diary and some of the contents recovered from the flat by those photographers were posted online and on social media, and it ultimately attracted a dream team of local Hong Kong amateur researchers and enthusiasts. Beginning in 2017-2018, Angus Hui began digitizing all the documents and the diary. And in 2024, the team carried out rather exhaustive research to hunt down all the bits and pieces from Mr. Lam's life. They interviewed fellow World War II and D-Day enthusiasts and historians, relatives and acquaintances of Mr. Lam, and it took years, but they were able to locate official documents, ship's logs, registries, and photographs that corroborated the narrative contained in this personal diary. Mr. Lam Pingyu was born to an overseas Chinese family on the island of Java in 1911. His patriotic father's origins were in Xinhui, next door to Taishan. Mr. Lam Sr. sent young Pingyu to Guangzhou for primary and secondary education, and there he studied at schools affiliated with Lingnan University. And growing up at such a formative time in Chinese history as the 1920s and 30s, it's not surprising that Mr. Lam became filled with patriotic fervor and was among those young Chinese hoping for their nation to experience a kind of great rejuvenation. And he particularly felt this way following the 9/18 Mukden incident in 1931. Just a little interesting sidebar. While Mr. Lam was studying in Guangzhou, one of his classmates was a man named Wu Shun-tuk, S.T. Wu. Now, I was a customer of Mr. Wu for 9 years during my stint in Hong Kong. He and his brother James went on to found Maxime's Catering, Meisum. I ate at their fast food restaurants, consumed hundreds of Meisum custard egg tarts, ate at Jade Garden, Peking Garden, and regifted their mooncakes every Mid-Autumn Festival. Yeah, good old Maxime's, a Hong Kong institution since 1956. Anyway, after their years together as fellow students, Mr. Wu went into business, and Lam Pingyu in 1930, he ended up enlisting at the Whampoa Military Academy. I guess Lam Pingyu was what you might call a Honghu Zhizhi, someone filled with noble aspirations to play his part in restoring China to its former historic greatness. Lam had lamented in May 1933 about the state of his nation. Quote, "Misfortunes in May again, national humiliation, war, failure, women, etc. are problems that have been haunting my mind for days on end. Undoubtedly they are unsolvable, plunging every single Chinese youth into multiple layers of embarrassing hardships. Since the Mukden incident, the amount of provocations heaped upon our youth is enough to jolt a several thousand-year-old mummy to life. Who would believe that our country is a sleeping lion?" End quote. This despair at China's seeming helplessness led Lam Pingyu and several others in September 1936, just a couple months before the Xi'an incident, to petition Chiang Kai-shek to send them to England for additional naval training. In that year, the Chinese Navy, well, for all intents and purposes, wasn't much to sneeze at, but you had to start somewhere, and Lam was aiming to be part of that. Mr. Lam had been frustrated by the lack of progress. Before petitioning Jiang, he had written in his diary, quote, "I cannot believe that servitude is so deeply rooted within China. I was totally wrong in wasting these years in this beggarly establishment. Where did all your beautiful dreams go? I'm about to cry. Is this what a Navy should be? What petty patriotic slogans it erects? It never crossed my mind that complacency is the main tenet of military life. How obtuse I am to ask for industriousness." End quote. Alas, the petition was turned down, but not forgotten about. Mr. Lum went on and continued his naval career and was based in Jiangsu and later on in Guangzhou and Human. Years later, with the world under much different circumstances, on February 20th, 1942, Jiang sent a telegram from Chongqing to the London Foreign Office saying he was interested to send a number of Chinese junior naval officers there, around 30 to 50, for training and to gain real-time experience in a war zone. And he asked the same from Roosevelt. And both governments, not wanting to be outdone by the other, and with an eye towards future relations with China once this whole World War II thing was over, they both agreed. Jiang was looking to parlay this cooperation with the Allies into what he hoped would one day be a formidable Chinese navy. Going back to Empress Dowager Cixi's marble boat, the Chinese Navy hadn't had much to show for itself. What few naval assets the nationalists did have, at this point, had been destroyed by the Japanese. By mid-1942, both governments had agreed to take on a number of Chinese junior naval officers and put them through a training program in England and in the States. And over 400 applicants made their way to Chongqing, the wartime capital, and went through a rigorous testing and screening process. And those 400 were whittled down to 74. 50 got sent to the U.S. for training, and 24, Lam Ping Yu among them, were sent to Britain. Down to the last man, they were patriotic and determined to jianguo, or aid in building their country. And by June 1943, Lam Ping Yu and his cohort started making their way to England. Now today, you can take Air China Flight 937 from Chongqing all the way to London in less than 15 hours, and that's with a 90-minute layover in Beijing. But not for Mr. Lam Ping Yu and his fellow Chinese naval officers. Back then, it was a long schlep. They went from Chongqing to Kunming, where they were flown, courtesy of the Flying Tigers, over the hump to Calcutta, and then from there they took a train ride to Mumbai. Then they sailed across the Indian Ocean to the Gulf of Aden to the Red Sea, up the Suez Canal to Port Said. While they were in Cairo, they got to take in the sights, and some of the officers got a few souvenir photos in front of the pyramids and the Sphinx. Italy had just surrendered on September 8, 1943, so they sailed right through the Mediterranean without incident, through the Strait of Gibraltar, and up the Atlantic coast all the way to Liverpool, arriving in Greenwich October 8th, 1943, a day before John would be celebrating birthday number 3 with his Aunt Mimi in Woolton. But as soon as they arrived at their destination in Greenwich, it was training and classes all day and all night. They were even taught all the rules and etiquette of being an English naval officer. And for the 7 months from October 1943 to May 1944, they trained. Lam Ping Yu and these other men who accompanied him from China didn't know it yet, but their first mission as naval officers would be the Normandy invasion, D-Day, the 6th of June. Let me read a few excerpts from his diary, which began on May 28, 1944. In this first entry, Lam Ping Yu wrote, quote, "Bade farewell to the gunnery school Commodore today. Went to London in the afternoon to catch the Glasgow train along with 7 others. Beyond excited, though we only know that we are to train on a ship. As far as the ship's name or location, we haven't the faintest idea." End quote. The next day, on May 29th, Lam Ping Yu further wrote, quote, "Arrived at Glasgow around 7 a.m. and breakfasted in the station. At 9, headed to the receiving station according to instructions given by the gunnery school, where we learned our ship assignments. I've been assigned to Ramillies, moored somewhere about an hour's train ride from Glasgow." End quote. On June 2nd, the officers were notified that an important announcement was forthcoming regarding their assignment. Lam wrote, quote, "Speculations abound. Some say a second front, some say we are to escort the Soviets or doing something else around Iceland. No one is allowed ashore. All preparations are to be finished today. We immediately sailed southwards after leaving port. obviously to open a second front then. End quote. On June 5th, the night before D-Day, the mission was announced to everyone. Lamm had written, quote, "Around 8 p.m., saw the Army's landing craft, as numerous as ants, scattered and wriggling all over the sea, moving southwards. Each vessel has a barrage balloon tethered to it to prevent low-altitude airstrikes from the Luftwaffe." End quote. The vessel that Lam Ping-yu and his fellow officers were assigned to was the Ramillies, a dreadnought class of battleship first commissioned in September 1917. It was named for the small town in southern Belgium, site of a major battle fought in 1706 during the War of the Spanish Succession. It didn't see any action during the Great War. Prior to D-Day, the Ramillies had served in the Atlantic, Mediterranean, and Black Sea. After more than a quarter century of service, this vessel was all patched up and ready to be called into action. Like Xia An, who gave us the Chengyu, Dongshan Zai Qi, this vessel was going to have one last hurrah, and what a glorious way to end its career, participating in the invasion of Normandy and the liberation of France. The Ramillies was part of the Eastern Task Force that included the battleship Warspite, the Monitor Roberts, 12 cruisers, and 37 destroyers. The Eastern Task Force was assigned to Sword Beach, the easternmost of the 5 landing zones. The British and Canadians landed at Sword, Juneau, and Gold Beach. The Americans landed at Utah and Omaha Beach. The crew of the Ramillies was tasked with softening up the German defenses and blasting away at German fortifications with their 15-inch guns prior to British troops storming the beaches. When it all began at the crack of dawn on that fateful and historic morning off the coast of Sword Beach, the Ramillies performed admirably. And when it was all finished, the ship lingered off the coast of Normandy for a few more days, providing additional artillery support as more and more troops and equipment came to shore and joined those ahead of them, pushing the Germans southward. Let me quote a few words from Lam Ping-yu, who was an eyewitness and unwitting chronicler of one of the defining moments of the 20th century. On the 6th of June, he wrote, quote, "Before 6 a.m., Ramillies also opened fire. 3 torpedoes were fired at us, and we managed to dodge them as we were at that moment turning around to adjust our firing position. The 3 torpedoes narrowly missed the ship on both sides, which was exceptionally fortunate. The Navy took full charge of covering the landings, whereas the Air Force focused on bombing inland transportation routes to impede German reinforcements. So far, the operation is proceeding quite smoothly. All personnel take their meals at their stations during active operations. Bread, sausages, tinned beef, all rationed out. Tea time is not omitted either." End quote. One Norwegian vessel in the task force was sunk by one of those incoming German torpedoes. Lamm mentioned in his diary about incoming torpedoes, though not specifically about the Norwegian vessel. And all 24 Chinese officers on board the Ramillies on that D-Day morning were detailed in the ship's log. Lam Ping-yu was no Baron Munchausen who wrote falsified and fantastical stories of his travels. Everything that he mentioned in his diary was all substantiated through the painstaking research and analysis of other wartime documents, photographs, and personal recollections of other eyewitnesses. The day after the invasion, on June 7th, Lamm wrote, quote, "Arrived at Portsmouth Harbor in the morning. Oiler and ammunition ship already waiting by the anchorage. After them came the postal boat with mail for all. This is quite an important matter with around 1,000 personnel in different states of mind, yet all yearning for news from family and friends. The British military higher-ups do have a way of managing such business." End quote. Less well known than the Normandy invasion of June 6, 1944, was the invasion of Provence in southern France on August 15, 1944. This was called Operation Dragoon and was fought mid-August to mid-September of that same year. The Germans were pushed back to the eastern border between France and Germany. It was only a matter of time now. During Operation Dragoon, the Ramilleys had been assigned to the Mixed Task Force 88 of the U.S. and Royal Navies. They were to serve as the escort carrier force and be commanded by British Rear Admiral Thomas Hope Trowbridge. Once again, Mr. Lam Ping Yu and his fellow officers on board the Ramilleys, as they had done on June 6th, aided the ground forces by pounding away at any enemy resistance and destroying whatever German infrastructure was within reach of their guns. Well, you know the rest of the story. 8 months later, the war was over in Europe. I'll get to Mr. Lam in a minute, but as far as the Ramilleys, it became a barracks ship after the war, and shortly thereafter, in 1948, the vessel was sold for scrap and broken apart. As for Mr. Lam Ping Yu and his fellow officers, following the success of their mission off the shores of northern and southern France, they got to enjoy a little fun in the sun on the beaches of Corsica. They were then ordered back to Asia to join up with the British fleet there. Some of the Chinese officers remained in Britain to get further submarine training, and the rest headed to Australia to join up with the British fleet there. And by the time they arrived and were given their orders, Japan had surrendered. Mr. Lam ended up leaving Sydney and was ordered to Hong Kong to play a part in Operation Armour. If you recall from that series on the history of Hong Kong, not only those confined to Stanley Prison, North Point Camp, and Argyle Street Camp suffered. For the 3 years and 8 months of Japanese occupation, all those Hong Kongers who didn't flee across the border to China had to put up with all kinds of deprivation, including constant hunger and an absence of most all basic services. And when the Japanese left and the British returned, there wasn't even enough rice to feed the population for a month, not even for a few weeks. So Operation Armour was meant to alleviate this suffering by expediting shipments of rice, coal, flour, milk, sugar, and all kinds of other basic food necessities and get it to the starving people of Hong Kong. Mr. Lam and his fellow officers arrived on September 17th, 1945, and were part of the group that helped bring emergency relief to the shell-shocked people of Hong Kong and to restore public services. Though it would take a while before things returned to a new kind of normal, Operation Armour saved a lot of lives at one of the darkest hours ever in Hong Kong's history up till then. Mr. Lam, then 34 years old, had written in his diary, quote, "Went ashore with many of the British officers on September 18th, 1945. Hong Kong was an old haunt of mine, but it has drastically changed since the Japanese occupation. Nigh unrecognizable. It is now a wasteland with rampant inflation and starving locals. Daily casualties exceed 100. End quote. And so it was, like it always is after a war or horrible natural disaster that leads to the deaths of tens and tens of millions. People and nations slowly began to rebuild. In China, as we know, the masses went from the frying pan into the fire. The Civil War that had really begun way back in April 1927, I guess you could say, was now being fought to the death, and there was no longer anything left to separate these two rivals from each other. And Lam Ping Yu was like a lot of people in China during the late 1940s, wondering what to do. Stay, leave, go where? Everyone living at that moment, at that place and time, had to make this profound decision. Lam Ping Yu included. In 1946, after 3 years of further training and studies in Great Britain, Lam returned to China. You know, of the 24 patriotic young Chinese naval officers, Mr. Lam Ping Yu included, who shared this adventure, 2 died in shipwrecks during the Chinese Civil War. The rest, 9 or 10 of them, went to Taiwan and continued to serve in the ROC military. One of them became Chiang Kai-shek's personal interpreter, and one of the officers applied and was granted naturalization in Britain in 1950. And the rest remained in the new People's Republic of China, and of those who remained in China, some of them became founding members of the PLA Navy. One of them went on to serve in the CPPCC. Lam Ping-yu was the only one who didn't choose sides and cross the border into Hong Kong. And for the next 20 years or so, living in a place that didn't have its own navy, he worked as a merchant sea captain for Wakwong Shipping. As for Mr. Lam, had he known he would have become someone of historical interest, I suppose he would have taken better care of his personal possessions. All of those papers, memorabilia, and of course the diary of his experiences in 1944 were left with Mr. Lam's sixth brother, who kept them inside that flat in Sai Ying Pun. Mr. Lam married a Japanese woman and had 2 children with her, a son and a daughter. The family lived in Italy for a couple of years before ending up in Sao Paulo, Brazil. When overpopulation and poverty began to plague early 20th century Meiji-era Japan, it led to a massive migration of Japanese to South America. Brazil has, I think, the largest ethnic Japanese population in the world outside of Japan. Maybe that's how the family ended up there. After a while, it all became too much for Mr. Lam. Though crime today in Sao Paulo is much better than it used to be, for Mr. Lam, it became too much for a man his age. And in 1996, aged 85, he moved to the U.S. He became too infirm to keep up his letter correspondence and was too old to embrace the new internet. Lam Ping-yu passed away in 2000 at the age of 89, and over the next 15 years, he was slowly forgotten by all but his surviving children, and his experiences on board the Ramillies off the coast of Normandy, and then in southern France, and coming to the rescue of the people who he would join as fellow Hong Kongers. Like so many untold stories, this just slowly faded away. And if not for that chance encounter mentioned at the outset, who would have known? Makes you think, doesn't it? How many of these stories like Mr. Lam's never got told? Well, through the hundreds of hours of research, travel across continents to fill in missing pieces, and connecting with family, relatives, and acquaintances of Mr. Lam Ping-yu and others among his cohort of Chinese naval officers, this story has been pieced together and continues to be investigated. Mr. Lam and the rest of his fellow naval officers, they didn't play a big role in the war. Their involvement didn't turn the tide of anything. They were just part of it. They were witnesses to a part of World War II history that, up to the discovery of Mr. Lam's diary, was never part of the story of China's participation in World War II. Well, now it is. Once again, my deepest appreciation to Mr. John Mack and Mr. Angus Hui for their leadership and efforts in bringing this story to light and allowing the diary of Mr. Lam Ping-yu, Lin Ping-yao, to put a face and an identity to this unknown story from World War II and these unsung Chinese heroes of D-Day. So, until the next time when we meet again on the Avenue, this here's Laszlo Montgomery signing off, as usual, from Los Angeles, California. Hot August nights are just around the corner. Do consider the benefits of coming back next time for another exciting episode of the China History Podcast.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.